Eli's IT consulting work required long hours and plenty of travel, but he'd specifically arranged his schedule to be home more often after Sophie started first grade. "I'm not complaining about your hours," he said quietly. I miss spending time with you." Sophie looked up from her methodically arranged plate. "Why do you and Daddy talk funny now?" The question hit me like a slap. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You use your work voice with Daddy, like when you talk to people on the phone." Eli and I exchanged glances across the table. Even our 7-year-old could sense the growing distance between us. "Grown-ups sometimes get stressed about work stuff," I said, reaching over to smooth Sophie's dark curls. "It doesn't mean anything's wrong." But something was wrong, and it had been wrong for months. The problem was, I wasn't sure I wanted to fix it anymore. After dinner, while Eli helped Sophie with her homework, I retreated to our bedroom to fold laundry. My phone buzzed with another text from Mark. "Thinking about our conversation today. You deserve someone who really sees you." I smiled, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest. Mark did see me, really see me. He saw the woman I used to be before I became just Eli's wife and Sophie's mom. With Mark, I was Calantha again, not just Cal or Honey or Mom. "Cal?" Eli's voice from the doorway made me jump. I quickly turned my phone face down on the dresser. "What?" "I was thinking maybe we could watch a movie tonight, after Sophie goes to bed, like we used to." I looked at him standing there, hopeful and handsome in that quiet way of his, and felt a stab of something. Guilt, maybe, or just irritation that he was trying so hard when it felt too late for trying. "I'm really tired," I said, "and I need to prepare for tomorrow's meeting." The hope faded from his eyes. "Right, of course." He turned to leave, then paused. "Cal, are we okay?" The question hung in the air between us. I could have said yes, could have made an effort, could have suggested we talk about whatever was happening to us. Instead, I said, "We're fine, Eli. You're overthinking things." Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I crept downstairs to get a glass of water. That's when I saw it, my coat draped over the kitchen chair where I'd left it, and Eli's reading glasses on the counter nearby. My stomach dropped as I remembered the coffee receipt in my coat pocket, the one from Mark's cafe, with his employee discount circled in red ink and a little smiley face drawn next to it. I checked the pocket. The receipt was still there, but it had been unfolded and carefully refolded. Eli had found it. The next morning, Eli was already gone when I woke up. He'd left coffee in the pot and Sophie's lunch packed on the counter, his usual thoughtful gestures that somehow felt more pointed now. No note, no goodbye kiss, just the evidence of his care and my growing guilt. At work, I tried to focus on spreadsheets and filing, but my mind kept wandering to Mark. We'd met 6 months ago when I'd started frequenting the little cafe near my office. He was different from Eli, spontaneous, artistic, full of stories about the music he was writing and the places he wanted to travel. He made me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. "Where are you having lunch today?" The message was casual enough, but I could read the subtext. He knew about the receipt. I could have explained then, could have told him about the friendship, about feeling lonely and invisible, about needing someone to see me as more than just a wife and mother. Instead, I chose the path that would hurt him most. "You're being paranoid," I said. "Mark is just the guy who works at the cafe. He's friendly. It's called customer service." Customer service doesn't usually include drawing smiley faces on receipts. "Maybe he's just a nice person. You should try it sometime." Eli flinched like I'd slapped him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When's the last time you looked at me like I was interesting instead of just convenient?" "I ask about your day every day." "No, you ask if I'm okay, if I need anything, if the house is running smoothly. You don't ask about me." "Then tell me about you," he said, standing up. "Tell me what's going on with you, because I feel like I don't know you anymore." I stared at him, this man I'd married 8 years ago, This good, decent man who deserved better than the person I was becoming. And instead of being honest, instead of trying to bridge the gap between us, I said the words that would widen it beyond repair. Maybe the problem isn't that you don't know me. Maybe the problem is that you never did. Mark's Cafe was exactly the kind of place I'd always imagined myself belonging. Exposed brick walls covered with local artwork, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, the smell of freshly ground coffee beans mixing with the sound of indie music and quiet conversations. It was the opposite of my suburban life, and that's exactly why I loved it. I found Mark behind the counter, his dark hair pulled back in a small bun, wearing the kind of vintage band t-shirt that Eli would never understand. When he saw me, his face lit up with that smile that had first caught my attention 6 months ago. "The usual?" he asked, already reaching for a cup. "Actually, make it a large today. I need the caffeine." He studied my face while the espresso machine hissed and steamed. "Rough night?" "You could say that." Mark finished my latte with a perfect leaf design in the foam, another small gesture that made me feel special, seen. Eli had never learned to make coffee art, had never thought to try. "Want to sit?" Mark nodded toward the corner table we'd claimed as ours over the past few months. I glanced around the cafe. It was the lunch rush, but Mark's coworkers seemed to have things handled. "Don't you need to work?" "I'm the assistant manager, perks of the job." We settled into our usual spots, and I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, using it as an anchor against the anxiety that had been building since last night's confrontation with Eli. "So," Mark said, leaning back in his chair, "want to talk about what's bothering you?" This was what I loved about him, the way he asked direct questions, the way he actually wanted to hear the answers. My husband found the receipt from yesterday. And he's asking questions. Mark was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "What kind of questions?" "About you, about why I come here, about whether I'm telling him the truth about my lunch breaks." "Are you?" The question was gentle, but pointed. I looked at Mark, really looked at him. He was handsome in an effortless way, with the kind of creative energy that had been missing from my life for years. But more than that, he was interested in me. When I talked about feeling invisible at home, he listened. When I mentioned dreams I'd given up, he encouraged me to pursue them again. "No," I admitted, "I'm not." "Cal." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "We need to talk about this, about what's happening between us." My heart started beating faster. We'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both of us knowing we were crossing lines but neither willing to name what we were doing. "I know," I said. "I care about you. A lot. And I think you care about me too." I did care about him. More than I should. More than was safe. It's complicated, Mark. Everything worth having is complicated. I have a daughter, a family. I can't just... "I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to do," he said softly. "I'm just asking you to be honest about what you do want." Before I could answer, my phone rang. Eli's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a stab of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. "I should take this," I said, pulling my hand away from Mark's. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Hi, I was just calling to apologize for last night. I think I overreacted." Eli's voice was warm, conciliatory. He was trying to fix things, trying to bridge the gap I'd created. And here I was sitting across from another man who was asking me to choose. "It's okay," I said, not looking at Mark. "I was thinking maybe we could go out this weekend, just the two of us. Maybe that new restaurant you mentioned?" Let me check my schedule." "Cal, is everything okay? You sound distracted." "I'm just at lunch. Can we talk about this later?" "Of course. I love you." The words hung in the air, waiting for a response. "I'm sure you two have lots to discuss." He walked away without another word, but I could feel his eyes on us as he left the cafe. My hands were shaking as I reached for my purse. "I have to go," I said. "Cal, wait. I can't do this right now." I practically ran out of the cafe, leaving Mark sitting alone at our table. But even as I hurried back to my office, I knew it was too late. Paul had seen us together, had seen the way we looked at each other, had drawn his own conclusions. And knowing Paul, those conclusions would reach Eli before the day was over. The restaurant was one of those family-friendly chain places with crayons on the tables and a menu designed to please everyone while exciting no one. It was Paul's choice, his birthday dinner, his pick, and I suspected he'd chosen it specifically because the bright lighting and open layout would make it impossible to have a private conversation. We were all there, Eli and me, Sophie coloring on her kids' menu, Paul and his wife Linda, and Maureen, Eli's mother, who'd been giving me pointed looks since we sat down. The only person missing was Jenna, who'd canceled at the last minute with a convenient headache. "So, Cal," Paul said, cutting into his steak with more force than necessary, "how's work been? Keeping you busy?" "It's fine," I replied, focusing on my salad. I could feel Eli tense beside me. "That's good. Important to have outlets, ways to break up the routine." The emphasis on outlets wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Linda shot her husband a warning look, but Paul ignored her. "Paul," Maureen said quietly, "perhaps we could talk about something else?" "Of course, Mom. I was just making conversation." Paul smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Yes, I was with a friend. And yes, maybe I should have mentioned it to Eli, but I didn't think having coffee with someone required a full disclosure." "Pal," Eli said softly. "No, let me finish." I was warming up now, the words flowing faster. "I'm tired of feeling like I have to account for every minute of my day, every person I talk to, every coffee I buy. I'm a grown woman, not a child who needs supervision." "Nobody said you were a child," Maureen said carefully. "Didn't you? Because that's how it feels. Like everyone's watching me, waiting for me to mess up, looking for reasons to criticize." "Maybe," Paul said, his voice deadly calm. "People are watching because you're acting like you have something to hide." The words hit their target. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and rage. "I don't have to listen to this," I said, standing up abruptly. "Sophie, get your coat." "But I didn't get dessert yet," Sophie protested. "We'll get ice cream on the way home." "Cal, please," Eli said, reaching for my hand. "Sit down. Let's talk about this." "Talk about what? About how your family has already decided I'm guilty of something? About how you're all sitting here judging me for having a friend?" "Is that what he is?" Paul asked. "A friend?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could have said yes, could have diffused the situation, could have salvaged what was left of the evening. Instead, I let my anger make the choice for me. "That's none of your business." The admission, or non-denial, sent shockwaves around the table. Linda gasped softly. Maureen closed her eyes. Eli looked like I'd punched him in the stomach. "Mommy?" Sophie's voice was small and confused. "Why is everyone upset?" I looked down at my daughter, at her wide eyes and crayon-stained fingers, and felt a rush of shame so intense it made me dizzy. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, I doubled down. "Because some people can't mind their own business," I said, grabbing my purse. "Come on, Sophie, we're leaving." "I want to stay with Daddy," Sophie said, her lower lip trembling. "Sophie." "Let her stay," Eli said quietly. "I'll bring her home later." I looked around the table one more time, at Paul's satisfied expression, at Maureen's disappointment, at Linda's embarrassment, at Eli's quiet devastation. Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving my family behind. In the parking lot, I sat in my car with shaking hands and called the one person I knew would understand. "Mark, it's me. Can we meet?" I didn't go home that night until after 11, long after Sophie's bedtime, long after I knew the house would be quiet. I'd spent hours driving around, then sitting in Mark's apartment talking about everything and nothing, letting him convince me that I deserved better than a husband who didn't understand me and a family who didn't support me. The house was dark except for the porch light Eli always left on for me. I slipped inside as quietly as possible, but I found him waiting in the living room, sitting in his reading chair with a manila folder in his lap. "How's Sophie?" I asked, hanging my keys on the hook by the door. "Upset, confused. She asked me why you left without saying goodbye." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I was angry. I needed some air. "For 4 hours?" I didn't answer. We both knew where I'd been, even if we weren't ready to say it out loud. Cal, we need to talk. It's late, Eli. What broke was my ability to pretend this was all innocent, all explainable, all somehow his fault. I don't know, I said finally. You don't know? I don't know what it is, okay? I don't know what I'm doing or why I'm doing it or what I want to happen. But you know you're lying to me. Yes. And you know you're having an affair? The word hung between us like a blade. I'd been avoiding it, dancing around it, calling it friendship and connection and anything but what it actually was. We haven't slept together. Yet. The single word carried the weight of inevitability. He was right. Mark and I were heading somewhere, and we both knew it. Cal, Eli's voice was softer now, almost pleading. Help me understand. What did I do wrong? What can I fix? The questions I'd been dreading, the ones that required me to look honestly at my marriage, at my choices, at the person I'd become. You didn't do anything wrong, I said, and meant it. Then why? Because I struggled to find words for feelings I'd been avoiding for months. Because I feel invisible. Because I feel like I'm just going through the motions of being your wife instead of actually being your wife. Because I look at my life and I don't recognize the person I've become. So you decided to become someone else with him? I didn't decide anything. It just happened. Bullshit. The profanity was so unlike Eli that it shocked me. Affairs don't just happen, Cal. They're a series of choices. You chose to keep seeing him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to text him instead of talking to me. You chose to leave our daughter at dinner tonight to go running to him. Each accusation hit home because each one was true. What do you want me to say, Eli? That I'm sorry? That's why I called you. No, you don't understand. If he's been planning this for weeks, if he has lawyers involved, he's not just angry, he's done. The finality in Mark's voice scared me more than the lawyer's call had. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should slow down, take a step back, let you figure out your situation. My situation? Your divorce, your custody battle, your life. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Are you breaking up with me? We were never together, Cal. Not really. We were just figuring things out. That's not what you said yesterday. Yesterday, you said you cared about me, that you wanted me to choose. That was before lawyers got involved, before this got real. I stared at Jenna's ceiling, feeling the ground disappear beneath me. So you're abandoning me too? I'm not abandoning you. I'm being realistic. You have a daughter, Cal. You have a life to sort out. I can't be part of that right now. But I know what you thought. I thought it too. But this is different now. This is divorce courts and custody battles and financial settlements. This is real life, and I'm not ready for real life. The line went quiet. Then, I'm sorry, Cal. I really am. He hung up, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my choices. At 10 a.m., I stood on the porch of the house I'd shared with Eli for 5 years, waiting for someone to answer the doorbell. When the door opened, it wasn't Eli, but a woman in a sharp business suit with a briefcase in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. Mrs. Greaves, Patricia Wong, we spoke this morning. Behind her, I could see Eli sitting at our kitchen table with another man in a suit, his lawyer, presumably. Maureen was there too, holding Sophie's hand while my daughter stared at me with confused, hurt eyes. Mommy? Sophie broke free from her grandmother and ran to me. Are you coming home? I knelt down and hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I don't know, sweetheart. Mrs. Greaves, the lawyer said gently, we need to discuss some things. Sophie, why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes? I want to stay with Mommy. It's okay, I said, kissing her forehead. Go with Grandma. I'll see you soon. Maureen led Sophie away, but not before giving me a look that was equal parts pity and disappointment. I followed the lawyers into what had been my kitchen, where Eli sat looking like a stranger. He was dressed in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his expression carefully neutral. This wasn't my husband. This was a man preparing for battle. Mrs. Greaves, Patricia Wong said, handing me the manila envelope, you're being served with a petition for divorce and a motion for temporary custody of your daughter. I opened the envelope with numb fingers. The papers were thick, official, full of legal language that boiled down to a simple message. Eli wanted out, and he wanted Sophie. Temporary custody? I looked up at Eli. You're trying to take my daughter away from me? I'm trying to protect her, he said quietly, from the chaos you've created. I'm her mother. You're also the parent who abandoned her at a restaurant to go meet your boyfriend. The words hit like a slap. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Eli's lawyer, a thin man with graying hair, consulted his notes. After that, we file for emergency custody based on abandonment and moral unfitness. Moral unfitness? You left your child to meet another man, Mrs. Greaves. You've been conducting an extramarital affair while living in the family home. You've been lying to your husband and exposing your daughter to marital instability. A judge would consider those factors in determining custody. I signed the papers with a shaking hand, each signature feeling like a small death. When it was over, the lawyers packed up their briefcases and left me alone with Eli in our kitchen. I never meant for it to go this far, I said. I know. I love Sophie. Whatever you think of me, I love our daughter. I know that too. Then why are you doing this? Eli was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the backyard where Sophie's swing set sat empty in the morning sun. Because loving her means protecting her, he said finally, even from you. The words broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. I walked out of my house, former house, and drove to the only place I could think to go. But when I got to Mark's cafe, there was a closed sign on the door and no sign of him anywhere. I was completely, utterly